Good morning, everyone. Before I start, I just wanted to actually, Joanne's done a really nice introduction to V.U.C.A there. I'm interested in each one of you and what you experience today in a V.U.C.A world. You know, how is that showing up for you? What's going on for you? Do you feel it's uncertain times? Do you feel it's more volatile? Are you dealing with uncertainty in your business? Could be your personal life, your relationships. Can you just take 2 minutes, no more than 2 minutes, to share with the person next to you? It can be behind you, next to you. Just take 2 minutes, just quick introduction to each other, and just talk a little bit about what's shaping your world today in a volatile world. You know, what is how is the world of data ambiguous to you? Does it bring fear up? Does it bring opportunity? What's happening? Just take 2 minutes, person next to you, no more than that. Just share. Okay. When you're ready. Okay, when you're ready. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, guys. It's wonderful that it's created so much dialogue so quickly. Everyone's got a lot to share by the looks of it.
Sorry. Okay, thank you, enough.
It's great.
Manel. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, obviously that's livened the room up, no doubt. A couple of people who are willing to share just thoughts that came up. Could be anything. Yeah. Oh, we have a microphone here. Anyone willing to share? Someone in the middle there? There was a lot of conversation going on here. You guys were having Simon and Norman, you were having an interesting conversation here. You have mics.
I hope we were just interested in thinking that times have always been volatile, uncertain, and ambiguous for whatever era you happen to be living in, probably. I mean, I'm not saying that they're not particularly volatile and particularly uncertain now, and maybe we live in a much faster changing world than we lived in before. So, but that, I think, was the nature of our conversation.
We also talk about how it becomes unpleasant at the point in time as we evolve, where the frameworks that we live in that define our world begin to collapse. And the good things about the collapse is something new is going to form, but in that period of time when the collapse is happening, this is when we particularly feel the sense of V.U.C.A, because the certainty and the predictability that we strive for is being challenged and eliminated until we form a new framework. So that was the other part of what we discussed.
Thank you. So I like this quote from someone it was actually in a Harvard Review. We appear to be in a permanent whitewater world, and sometimes in business particularly, we feel that. We have moments where things are calm and then suddenly something happens that we weren't expecting. Could be an acquisition, merger, something changes. And a lot of people that I speak to, I coach executives, I work in leadership development. A lot of people talk about this, and particularly with the influx of information, dealing with big data, dealing with information, no time for anything around creative thinking, strategic thinking. It's full meetings on, a full life. So this was just a nice quote, I thought. And I think the other thing with the V.U.C.A world, I don't want to talk about that because Joanne did such a great job on that, but I think this piece about frameworks is interesting with the population explosion, with the destruction of oceans, climate change, managing this big data. We want to advance, but at the same time, there's a need to protect our privacy, our personal data, our organizational data. 1 in 8 people still remain hungry. 1 in 9 people in the world still don't have access to clean drinking water. So we have some really significant challenges, and organizations and leaders, whether they're in business or government or NGOs, have a real role to play, I think, in helping to solve these problems, to take on these challenges. They can only do that if they thrive, if organizations sustain, if leaders of the organizations find a way to help them to sustain and prosper. So I wanted to talk about how we can all, I guess, help leaders thrive in a VUCA world and what their world looks like. This looks like in itself, looks like a very complex map. This is a map of conscious leadership, and these are the areas that leaders have to look at when they are dealing with ambiguous, complex world, with a volatile world. This was created by the Center for Conscious Leadership, of which I am a director, along with a lady called Gina Hayden, who has written a book called The Conscious Leader, Waking Up to the New World of Leadership. And this map is just interesting when we hear the leaders, the speakers that are coming up later today. You'll see that a lot of these areas are covered here. And I think I've got a little red thing here. I'm going to talk here about resilience. I'm going to talk about mindfulness. I'm going to talk about radical partnering. These are three things that I think are interesting, have very strong links together to help sustain leaders in a VUCA world. Simon Patterson is going to talk about purpose. Norman is going to talk a lot here around systems thinking later and living organizations. In fact, we're all going to be touching on some of these areas here about the responsibility that we all have to the wider system. We're going to talk a lot here around, you'll hear words like compassionate management. You'll hear words around vision and purpose, authenticity. And we'll also be talking a little bit later, Zebi will be talking about millennials and the future, those leaders that are rising up, those leaders that are going to be the next generation of leaders that will be dealing with a VUCA world. So this is really a map, and I wanted just to focus myself on these three areas that link up to the complexity and this wider system that we're working in. The three I wanted to cover are mindfulness. Although there's a huge amount of information on mindfulness, I'm not going to cover that. What I want to talk about today is the mindful leader, how it's important for a leader to develop an awareness and to develop different mental models to continue to remain curious and open-minded about the world. That can help them to begin to deal with some of these issues and complexities that the world is facing. You might wonder why we have a tree here. I watched a film this week called Walk With Me. It's about Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Buddhist monk, Vietnamese. He was exiled in the 70s. It was a beautiful film, if you get to watch it, called Walk With Me, about his life and the village that he has developed where they develop mindfulness. And he said he has learnt most from watching how a tree prepares for winter. And that's where he has taken most of his lessons. And I think there's a lot, and perhaps you'll hear later today, around watching how nature responds, how nature prepares for change. Trees, winter comes, there's storms, hurricanes, snow, ice, and yet they survive and they remain deeply rooted in the ground. And we were talking, a group of us yesterday, around the fact that nature doesn't need change programs to understand how to survive. I think humans, we need somehow to be told how to survive and to prepare. And so I think this piece around mindfulness is actually really interesting and really important about the next step, I guess, of how we deal in this world. And I think it's about strengthening our ability to connect from within to ourselves, to connect with each other, to connect with communities. And when we think about communities, it takes on a different perspective and quality of the way that we take responsibility for those around us. And it strengthens our ability when we have that resilience from within, the relationships we have, the wider community. It strengthens our ability to more skillfully initiate and manage change. When we think about a mindful leader, there are areas of a mindful leader that are important in a VUCA world. Emotional mastery, so managing one's emotions in times of change. Looking at creating commons, and what we mean by that is the old paradigm that we talk about is really I. It's the competition. I survive, and it doesn't matter about anyone else. The new world is about the we, the us. How do we all survive? I, as one leader, don't have the answer to everything. How do I co-create with others to solve these bigger challenges that the world is now facing? How can we all integrate our thinking? How can we see an organization, a little bit like the nature piece there, how do we see that as something that lives and breathes and has energy and gets blocked? Sometimes it's in a good state of health, sometimes it's not. How do we see that as a different being rather than a mechanistic robot? The role of business in society, understanding as a leader that I have a role in society broader than just my own business and making money, and that I have a higher purpose. Simon's going to talk about that a little bit later, so I won't cover that now. But one of the first things that we have to do to thrive is to expand our thinking. And I like this quote from Nick Petrie: to be successful, the leader's thinking must be equal or superior to the complexity of the environment. So what does that mean? How do we get a bigger mind, if that's the concept? How do we expand that mindset? It's about remaining curious. It's about increasing and widening our perspectives. When we widen our perspectives, it challenges our old ways of thinking, our old mental models. It increases the viewpoints that we have, so then it expands our ability to make sense of things. We look at things differently. We respect other people's points of view. We see that we don't always have the right answer, that when we have a shared view of things, often other people bring in the right answer for things. So there's a way that, and Erika Uffindell is going to talk in more detail about this, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about expansion of that mind and the leader's propensity to stay in a fixed view. In the old world, we talked about horizontal learning, which is really just about expanding our expertise in a particular area. So think if I'm a lawyer, I just learn more and more about the legal sector, more and more about the technical aspects of being a lawyer. But does that enable me to build good relationships? Does it enable me to listen and sense what the world needs, what my clients needs, what we as an organization will need to do to change, to support our clients, to advance their business? And so some of these areas, more around this mental complexity, this mental agility, expanding the more emotional intelligence, is called vertical learning. And that's something that Erika is going to talk about. But the aim is not to add more into the glass, not to know more about my issue, but more to grow the glass itself. Mindful leaders see the bigger picture. When they have a higher purpose, they can contribute more to the world. And actually, when we see the bigger picture, we kind of view things differently. And I'm going to just play a little video, hopefully the sound will work, of a leader that I think is, for me, one of the most perhaps forward-thinking in a market that is very challenging, but also community-based. He's Jeff Weiner of LinkedIn. He talks a lot about compassionate management. He talks a lot about the challenges of working in a fast-paced industry. But why I like this particular clip is that Jeff demonstrates that a leader of a very fast-paced organization, a CEO, can take time out. In organizations, we spend a lot of time in meetings, running from meetings. We don't have time to think about how can we be more creative? How can we manage some of these complex issues and challenges that we're facing? From a place of stillness, as Joanne said, we can be more creative. So I just like this quick clip about something that Jeff feels is important. Okay. No, it should be. Is it not? Oh, you know why? Could we haven't got the... Where's the sound thing? No.
No, it's plugging.
No. Is there someone in there?
Could you hear that?
No. No. It was playing earlier, so is there someone there? I don't know.
Try now.
So coaching is a big part of it, and then thinking strategically, thinking proactively. It's not just reactively. I mean, all of us are insanely busy. I just can't imagine managing this kind of growth, a company that's global, stockholders, the whole deal. How do you block out time for that thinking? It's an excellent question. So, thank you. That's my job. Several years ago, recognized increasingly, I just felt like I was back on my heels with regard to the schedule. Just that there were so many things I had to deal with. And you need time to catch your breath. You need time to think proactively. You need time to be able to sit down with folks and understand what's motivating them, what they're dreaming about, what they're fearful of. That takes so much time. And so started carving out buffers on my schedule. If you were to look at my calendar right now, you'd actually see big gray spots. If the Outlook calendar was printed out, and it's not a mistake. There wasn't a problem with the printer. I'm blocking out between roughly 2 hours a day, 30-minute, 60-minute blocks, so I can think, so I can take the time to get that stuff right. And is it
So I don't know many leaders who take 2 hours out of a day to take time to think about some of the big problems, challenges that organization is facing. So I think it's a really interesting issue, and that's what I liked about the kind of mindfulness piece, because when you can take time out, you can look at multiple perspectives and different ways, and no one single person or organization has the answer to the problems, which just links me to the idea of co-creation and moving from the idea of me versus you to us. And there are a number of companies that are co-creating or radical partnering. Great quote here from Tom Chi from Google Glass. Collaboration versus competition is a false dichotomy. People often say the natural state of nature is competition, but that's not so. Every living thing through its life cycle improves the viability of life of every other thing in the ecosystem. The fact that we consider competition and collaboration to be opposites is a completely human construct. And I just want to talk about a couple of examples there. Google Glass and Luxottica have come together, so the technology of Google and the understanding of glasses and luxury to make something desirable for people. Luxottica have come together. So this is a piece of radical partnering. So we've got fashion and technology together. Pantheon Enterprises, Laura Roberts, the CEO of Pantheon Enterprises, they are a conscious chemical company, and she talks about the idea of living in a world of possibility, where she works with the collective intelligence of the chemical industry, bringing together different competitors of hers to solve the problems in the new paradigm. IBM and Apple have come together to do amazing work for enterprises now. So taking the massive data and analytics and scale of IBM with the understanding of consumer experiences and bringing that into the corporate world now. So when we think about mindfulness and the capacity and capability of those leaders, plus the ability to co-create, undoubtedly it's going to create a more resilient approach to the world and its problems. So for me, I think that I just want to end with a couple of minutes. I think Joanne's giving me a 2-minute warning. That I think for me, resilience is about the capabilities that we have, the expertise. It's the capacity to expand those mental models, to take on and be willing to co-create with competitors, to learn more, to adapt faster, to see and connect more of those dots of that initial model I showed, and to bring the whole self to the challenges that we face. Sometimes we try and work only in the head. We have 3 intelligence centers. We're going to hear a little bit more about this later. But the ability to bring our whole self to these challenges is about bringing our head and our heart and our gut to some of these things, so that, if any of you know the U theory, so that when we bring ourselves to that area where we have an open mind, where we have an open heart, where we have an open will, an ability to let things go and be aware and understand that things evolve, only then really can we start to build an opportunity to think differently and create some of those solutions to some of those problems that we're facing. So I just want to end with, I think people in leadership roles have the best chance of making a difference if they can bring their whole selves to the moment and to the challenges that V.U.C.A world is presenting. And I think in terms of thriving, I think changing beliefs is a really important part of that. Cultivate open minds, expand perspectives, embrace the us in the systemic view, as Jeff Weiner does, allow space for creativity and compassion so that we can serve that wider community, to change habits, to move from immediacy and reaction to more mindfulness response, and to help to change culture, to embrace that co-creation, connection and community, and to accept the unknown, recognize that we need to have intelligent risk, but failure is actually a prelude to innovation. So a last thought to leave you with, I think we are moving from a world of problems which we have tried to solve through speed, analysis, and the elimination of uncertainty, the fear of uncertainty, into a world of dilemmas which needs patience, time to be still, sense-making, that piece around the vertical learning, and an acceptance of uncertainty, as Simon and Norman said, that this kind of has always been, it will always be. But some of these pieces are just ideas and themes that we need to be aware of to help us be sustainable and thrive in this V.U.C.A world. So you'll hear a lot more about some of these themes from these next wonderful speakers. Thank you.